Hello and a very warm welcome to this very special edition of World Panorama. I'm Sana Khan. A major part of this week's show will focus on elections in Afghanistan. Long queues formed outside polling stations in cities across the country as Afghans cast their ballots at some 6,200 centres under tight security. Turnout was reportedly so high that not only was voting extended by an hour, but some polling centres also ran out of ballots, reflecting the determination of the Afghan people to elect a new president, despite a recent spike in attacks by the Taliban. Now, of the 8 candidates in the race for the presidency, there are 3 front-runners, former foreign ministers Abdullah and Zalmay Rasool, and former finance minister Ashraf Ghani, who all enjoy similar levels of support, according to unofficial polls there. President Hamid Karzai is constitutionally barred from seeking a third term after ruling Afghanistan since the fall of the Taliban back in 2001. Here's all the latest.
Afghans braved the threat of Taliban violence on Saturday to elect a successor to President Hamid Karzai in the country's first democratic transfer of power. Long queues formed outside polling stations in cities across the country despite cold, wet weather as voters cast their ballots at around 6,000 centres under tight security.
Despite problems, despite challenges, despite threats and intimidation, you decided in good numbers, according to the preliminary reports, to come and vote for your future. This is true Afghanistan and people of Afghanistan, showing the resolve and braving the bad weather and intimidation.
Most people expect the election will be better run than the chaotic 2009 vote that handed the outgoing president Hamid Karzai a second term amid massive fraud and ballot stuffing.
آمدیم که امروز زعیم کشور خود تعیین بکنیم و سرنوشت افغانستان در دست جوانا است و می‌خواهیم که سرنوشت افغانستان تعیین بکنیم. ان شاءالله ما کدام مشکل نداریم و امنیت همچنان تامین است.
نن دست راغلیم زده راگیری راغلیم قراری ده امنیت تامین ده در خیر سرس خبر نده خلق و دوام سر از قرار کنند امنیت.
من افغان اشتراک کردم تا رای خوب بدم و حق من که رای بدم و پیام من برای تمام زنان افغان این هست که حتما بیاین به پای صندوق‌های رایدهی و رای که حق نای رای بدن.
The top 3 vote getters are expected to be Ashraf Ghani, a technocrat and former official in Karzai's government, Abdullah, a former foreign minister who was the second biggest vote getter against Karzai in the 2009 election, and Zalmay Rasool, another former foreign minister.
به شکلی که مردم ما در انتخابات سهم گرفتن به دشمنای افغانستان پیغام واضح دادن هیچ نوع تهدید هیچ نوع خطر مانع اراده ما.
The stronger the next president's mandate, the less vulnerable Afghanistan could be to instability. Even if the election is less flawed this time, it could take months, perhaps even until October, for a winner to be declared at a time when the country desperately needs a leader to stem rising violence as foreign troops prepare to leave.
Well, now that the voting is over, one can hope for some clarity on the future of Afghanistan. Clarity with respect to political stability, security, development, all of which will depend on how stable the next government is. We'll try and delve deeper into the subject. This week on the show, I welcome security expert Captain Alok Bansal. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me. The turnout has been tremendous, though we don't have any official figures, but the fact that, the Election Commission there took many steps in terms of security. They banned texting and, provided a sense of security for the people to come out and vote.
See, this shows the Afghan people's yearning for democracy, for change in government. Please understand, this is for the first time in history of Afghanistan that the leader at the helm of affairs would be changed through democratic affairs. In entire Afghan history, you've never had that the top leader has been changed through democratic means. This is going to be the thing, because earlier also we had elections, but Hamid Karzai continued. But this is one time when the change is inevitable. So I think the enthusiasm is that much greater, because people realize that their vote will usher in a new leader.
Right. And by people, you also mean the large amount of youth voters that at this time, get the opportunity to vote.
Absolutely. You must understand that many of the youth have probably grown up in the post-Taliban phase, and they are used to this democratization which they see, and they would like to retain this democratic things. But on the flip side, we must understand that most of the reports that are coming in right now are coming from urban centers, from towns, cities.
Okay.
So we have still not received news from the rural areas. So I have a suspicion that maybe in some of the provinces which are dominated by Taliban, like say Nuristan, Kunar, etc., there may have been less voting, especially in the rural areas.
Okay, but that being said, but even now there are many reports of sporadic instances of violences. So it's not like this election has been completely incident free. There has been violence, but not so much as was being anticipated. So in that sense, would you commend Afghanistan for, on its own conducting this, election up till now, which seems to be free and fair? Of course, there's a long time
there
gap.
is no doubt that the Afghan national security forces have come of age. In fact, the successful culmination of these elections would actually show that ANSF has the capability to maintain peace, ensure this sort of a massive exercise, because this sort of polling where people are stamping the ballot papers and putting them into the boxes, the security of these ballot boxes, the security of the candidates, security of the voters, that has been ensured by the Afghan national security forces. And to that extent, I think this shows to the entire international community, because many in the West have often expressed their skepticism as far as the ANSF is concerned, whether they would be able to hold on their own once the US troops and the NATO troops pull out. So this is, I think, one of the very clearest manifestation that ANSF has come of age, it has the capability, and it will be able to maintain law and order in Afghanistan.
All right, that in itself says a lot about the current situation of Afghanistan and where it's headed. We'll come to that in just a bit, but for once, let's just compare this to the previous elections. The vote at that time was about 30%. This time it's expected to be higher, but we don't have any official figures. Let's say it's around 42 to 45%. Do you think that even that's a significant improvement and will show results on the ground?
Certainly, because we need to understand between the last election and this election, a large number of youth have become eligible to vote. Secondly, in last elections, the Taliban was far stronger in many of the Pakhtun belts, and the voting in many of the Pakhtun areas was fairly low. More significantly, I think there was some sort of a skepticism amongst a large chunk of the population that President Hamid Karzai would continue. Okay. Whereas at this time, it is inevitable that there would be a new president. And so, since the change is inevitable, the people are that much more enthusiastic to make their vote count. Absolutely. And that is where you are seeing that the top 3 or 4 candidates have all gone in for multi-ethnic tickets. Their vice presidents invariably hail from different ethnic groups. Right. So they have tried to gather as much widespread support cutting across ethnic lines as is feasible. And that's why there is a tough competition that one is seeing.
All right. On that thought, just hold on to that thought. I'm going to come back to you in just a bit. Meanwhile, we have another report lined up for you about the Taliban that have been fighting the government and had vowed to disrupt the election process. The militants launched several attacks in 12 of the country's 34 provinces, killing at least 1 person and injuring scores of others. But the militants have failed, it seems, to interrupt the polling this time.
Earlier this week, a provincial council candidate and 9 of his supporters were killed 2 days after they were kidnapped. The Taliban claimed responsibility for these killings. It was yet another attempt to disrupt and defeat the Afghanistan establishment. The violence let loose by the Taliban has convinced many that future peace in the country can only come if the government in Kabul negotiates with it. Which is why the Taliban's announcement to open an office in Qatar in June 2003 was seen as a positive step, but mistrust remains high on both sides. It was in the early 1990s that Taliban emerged in northern Pakistan. This was after the Soviet troops withdrew from Afghanistan. Weary of the infighting after the Soviets were driven out, the Afghans welcomed them. The Taliban promised to restore peace along with their version of the Sharia or Islamic law. They started gaining world attention when they supported Islamic punishments like executions of convicted murderers and adulterers. Men had to grow beards and women had to wear the burqa. The Taliban banned television, music and cinema and prevented girls aged over 10 from going to school. In September 1995, they captured the Herat province bordering Iran. Exactly a year later, they captured Kabul after overthrowing the regime of President Burhanuddin Rabbani and his defense minister Ahmad Shah Massoud. By 1998, they controlled almost 90% of Afghanistan. They were accused of various human rights and cultural abuses. One notorious example was in 2001 when they destroyed the famous Bamiyan Buddha statues in central Afghanistan. In between, the Taliban provided sanctuary to Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda movement. After 9/11 attacks, NATO troops drove out the Taliban, although their leader Mullah Muhammad Omar was not captured. The Taliban reappeared in recent years, striking greater terror in both Pakistan and Afghanistan. In recent years, the Taliban have also increasingly relied on roadside bombs as a means of fighting NATO and Afghan forces. In 2012 alone, their brutal methods caused the death of almost 1,800 Afghan National Police personnel and about 900 Afghan National Army soldiers. They may not be fighting the Poles, but the shadow of the Taliban is inescapable. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
So now, you know, we all know these 3 or 4 front-runner candidates. They all say that if we become the president, we're going to sign this BSA, which Hamid Karzai clearly has not said anything. He said, I'm not signing this right now. But do you think that with these kind of threats looming large, the Taliban, the resurgence, the vacuum that might have been created if the NATO troops pull out, that Afghanistan, the forces can handle?
See, there are 2 things. One, very categorically, these elections have proved that the main raison d'etre or the main raison d'etre by which Taliban was drawing support of the populace, that is the foreign occupation, has started sounding hollow. Because with the inevitable withdrawal of the bulk of the US and NATO troops, I think that propaganda which Taliban had been indulging in, that the foreign occupation of the country is there, I think that has started losing its relevance.
Okay.
And to that extent, I think that's one of the reasons why Taliban was ineffective. As far as bilateral security arrangement is concerned, I have no doubts that whoever becomes the president will inevitably sign that agreement, because it will leave a very, very token force behind. And that force would be virtually invisible, because that would be confined to 1 or 2 bases close to the airfields. But it would have an immense psychological impact on the Afghanistan, because please understand that post US withdrawal, what you are going to see is not insurgency, but a civil war. And in Afghan context, always whoever has emerged victorious has done so by winning over other commanders, and most of them have been fence sitters who have crossed over. Like in the past, when Najibullah fell, we saw Dostam and Tanai cross over. And it is their crossing over that actually sealed the fate of Najibullah, not that he was defeated in a battle or something like that. So similarly, as long as this token force is present, that option that commanders would change side will not be there, because then everybody knows that there is an international backing for this government, and that would remain. As far as the candidates are concerned, I think President Karzai is not signing the BSA has got more to do with politicking, because President Karzai wants to retain certain leverage with the administration that comes after him. And other than Abdullah, he has provided certain amount of support to all the 3 front runners, that is Zalmay Rasool, Ashraf Ghani, and to some extent Abu Sayyaf. And
so you're saying Karzai is not going anywhere, he's going to be around.
That is if Abdullah does not win an outright victory, because as I said yesterday also, that the elections in Afghanistan are going to be very much like elections in Maldives, because the process is similar, where a candidate has to win more than 50% votes to get elected. And if in first round no clear-cut winner emerges, then Abdullah, who despite being of a mixed parentage and having had an Pashtun father, is still viewed as a Tajik, will have to face against a Pashtun. And invariably the next 3 candidates, their vote share will generally rally behind whoever is actually the challenger to Abdullah.
So the second round will be that much more clearer. Now I get your point over here, but I want to come to another very important question. We are talking about a high voter turnout. Things seem positive right now. We are talking about someone who is going to take over the regime from President Karzai. Now, do you see a radical change, or is it perhaps being too optimistic right now? Because, you know, how can we talk about such a radical change? It's going to happen slowly. Do you feel that way?
See, unless of course somebody like Abu Sayyaf actually comes to power, which to my mind looks very unlikely. I think the top three contenders, which is Abdullah, Ashraf Ghani and Zalmay Rasool, you won't see a very drastic change in any case. It will maybe only in the level of degrees that it changes. Probably Abdullah having been with Northern Alliance may like to distance himself. He may be a little more anti-Pakistani than probably the current administration has been. Ashraf Ghani, because of his US citizenship, etc., may be a little more pro-Western than the others. So to that extent, I don't see a drastic change in Afghan policies, irrespective of who becomes the president after this elections. But the credibility of this elections is very, very essential, because that would give Afghan youth confidence that they can change the governments through democratic means. And once that confidence actually percolates
and
down
also
to
a sense of faith
absolutely.
in the government that they
and
choose.
that will actually take the steam out of Taliban. And if this government is able to hold on after a change of government, if the ANSF maintains the level of competence that they have shown during the elections, you will see Taliban slowly losing the steam.
Okay. Talking about relations with India, do you see a change in that perhaps, or no, they will continue to be as cordial as they have been over the past years? And also with respect to the changing relationship that we've seen of the Karzai government with the West?
See, I have no doubts that relations with India will remain good. Firstly, because if you take a referendum within Afghanistan, I think India is the most popular country. Most Afghans like to come to India for medical, for education. Anybody who can afford it would like to come to Afghanistan, including President Karzai, who came for his wife's delivery to Gurgaon. So that's the fact. So anybody who is in Afghanistan looks up to India. All the four top candidates are for good relations with India. And of course, the degrees may vary. To my mind, Abdullah, Zalmay Rasool, and Ghani is the one where I feel there may be a slight dip as far as relations with India is concerned, because Ghani is far too westernized. He will, when you are looking at the relations with the West, I think for the West, the best bet is Ashraf Ghani. And of late, in last elections, that is in 2009, many Pakhtuns did not vote for him because they viewed him more as an American than as a Pashtun. But of late, when I talk to Pashtuns, there is tremendous support for Ashraf Ghani in this particular elections. And I wouldn't be surprised if he emerges as the number 2 candidate, despite President Karzai's support for Zalmay Rasool. And which has been
I'm going to take concluding comments from you, but first up, to understand the process better, here's a report which talks about the presidential election compliant period. That's from the 7th of April to the 27th of April. The preliminary results will come out on the 24th of April, and the final result will be announced in mid-May. Take a look at how the system in Afghanistan really works.
The Islamic Republic of Afghanistan has 34 provinces. President is both the head of state and the head of government. Legislative power is wielded by the bicameral National Assembly, the 102-member Mishrano Jirga or the House of Elders, or the 249-seat Hulisi Jirga or the House of People. The term of the Hulisi Jirga is 5 years. Candidates who get the most votes in each province win the seat. Each constituency has between 2 and 33 members each. 10 seats are reserved for Kuchi nomads. 68 seats are reserved for women. Candidates are elected on the basis of single non-transferable votes. Candidates who get the most votes win the seats. If no candidate gets 50% or more votes, a second round is held between the two candidates with the most votes. The president and 2 vice presidents are directly elected for 5-year terms. Presidents can remain in power for only 2 terms. In the House of Elders, 2 seats each are reserved for Kuchi nomads and disabled representatives. 17 are reserved for women. From time to time, the government convenes a Loya Jirga or a Grand Assembly to interpret the constitution and decide on critical national issues. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Captain Bansal, I'm going to take very quickly closing comments from you. The entire election process we've been discussing on Rajya Sabha TV. Our team went there. A lot of perspectives have been coming in. But if I were to ask you the success rate of these elections and the impact on Afghanistan.
I think the successful culmination of these elections would be a very, very big positive step as far as Afghanistan's transition towards peace and tranquility is concerned. And I think this would take the major steam out of Taliban and the major support that they have been trying to draw from the populace, because if the populace realize that it is their ballot that can change governments, I think they are not going to use the bullet.
Right. So it's the ballot and not the bullet that seems to be speaking this time, and a lot of youth voters understanding what the problem is and how to solve it. That's always a positive. Thanks so much, Captain Bansal, for joining me and sharing your thoughts on the show with me. With that, we're taking a very short break. A look at some sports news and all the buzz happening in the entertainment world is coming up right next. Thanks for staying with us. Time to bring you up to speed with all the sports news of this week. Here's all the sports action.
For the first time in 20 years, Tiger Woods will not be competing in the Masters Golf Tournament. The living legend recently underwent back surgery and after much speculation withdrew himself from one of the biggest golf events of the year. It's been no secret that Woods' success has dwindled over the years, and now more and more analysts have started to wonder if they're witnessing the beginning of the end of a man that revolutionized golf as a sport. Soccer fans and collectors of memorabilia have one more way to get excited for this year's World Cup after the tournament's official sticker album was launched in Brazil on March 31st. Thanks to memorabilia producer Panini, fans will be able to collect stickers of their favorite soccer stars, both past and present. With less than 70 days left until the World Cup officially begins, fans of the game now have one more way to brush up on their knowledge of all 32 participating teams and players. Even Brazil's 12 World Cup stadiums were honoured in the album. The red-hot Brooklyn Nets clinched a playoff berth and continued their season turnaround with a 105-96 victory over the Houston Rockets. Joe Johnson scored 32 points and the Nets won their 14th consecutive home game to reach the playoffs for the second straight season. US President Barack Obama celebrated the World Series champions Boston Red Sox at a White House ceremony on 1st April. Obama credited the team with helping Boston heal after the city's marathon bombing a year ago. World Series MVP and three-time World Series champion David Ortiz, known as Big Papi, then presented the president with the Red Sox jersey with the number 44.
And now a look at what's creating a buzz in the show business world. A look at the latest flicks and news from other arts and entertainment.
New British horror movie The Quiet Ones had its world premiere in London with its stars Sam Claflin and Jared Harris in attendance. The movie, made by the horror specialist production company Hammer Films, tells the story of Professor Copeland, played by Harris, who decides to test the theory that paranormal activity is caused by human negative energy by attempting to create his own poltergeist. The Quiet Ones will release in the UK on April 10th. A deluge of stars attended the London premiere of Noah, the epic blockbuster which has been making waves at the box office. Actor Russell Crowe, who plays the biblical figure who built an ark to save his family and specimens of every animal from the Great Flood, attended premiere with co-stars Emma Watson, Jennifer Connelly, Douglas Booth, Ray Winston and Logan Lerman as part of the UK leg of their promotional tour. Actor Johnny Depp attended a promotional event in Beijing for upcoming sci-fi blockbuster Transcendence. The Hollywood superstar spoke at a press conference at a hotel in Beijing on Monday as part of a two-day promotion blitz to the delight of screaming and shouting Chinese fans. His latest sci-fi movie tells the story of an ill scientist played by Depp who uploads his mind into a computer to gain powers beyond his wildest dreams. Transcendence is expected to debut in China on April 18th as a day-and-date release with the United States. 8 previously unreleased songs by the late Michael Jackson will be part of a new album, Escape. The songs were unearthed by Jackson's archive of recorded material by L.A. Reid, the chairman and chief executive of Epic Records. Escape will be released on May 13th. Many of the world's fashion elite, including designers Tom Ford, Domenico Dolce, Stefano Gabbana and Valentino, turned out to the opening of a new exhibition about Italian fashion at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. The exhibition shows designs from the 1940s up until the modern day, with pieces from labels such as Valentino, Giorgio Armani, Dolce & Gabbana, Gianfranco Ferré, Gucci, Missoni, Versace, Fendi and Prada. The glamour of Italian fashion 1945 to 2014 opens to the public on 5th April.
That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. See you next week, same time, with more international news. Till then, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. As I sign off, take a look at visuals from all over the world as lights went out at landmark monuments for celebrating the Earth Hour, an endeavour to save energy that's gaining popularity each year. Good night.